Time now for another edition of the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast, Penn State football preseason camp edition. I guess we're in week number 2. Andrew Kalista, Mike Gross of the Gross Rational Product, and Frank Danny of the York Daily Record. Guys, it's hard to believe we are 11 practices in to fall camp. And I almost said spring camp right there because I can't believe the season is upon us.
It's coming.
It's an exciting time. It's a hot time, not only in the weather, but with all the hype. And I just want to tell everybody, I got some hot news as well. As you guys know on this broadcast, 11 days ago, I became a father for the first time. So I'm very excited for that. I'm going to flop a picture up here.
There we go.
There's my little baby girl waving hello to everybody. Charlotte Grace is her name.
That's nice.
I'm excited.
Congratulations, you big guy.
Hey, Mike, you're a father multiple times. What one piece of advice would you give to Andrew?
As big as you think it's going to be bigger than that.
Oh, all right. There you go.
Right.
So batten down the hatches, my friend.
I'm ready. I've had some eventful nights, some eventful mornings. I could diaper anything I feel like. The question is, can I diaper it quick enough?
Well, there's really only one thing you need to diaper.
But it was fun being up at practice this week. Mike Portman, a friend of all of us, he heard I was a dad, talked my ear off, giving me some advice. So that was very, very much fun to be able to show pictures. I've never been able to do that before. So now I understand it, that I'm whipping out my phone and I'm trying to scroll through, seems like 3,000 pictures in the last 10 days that I've taken of my baby girl. Now, on the football front, AP poll came out, and we've made some predictions. I was taking some harassment in the email sector, which if you want to email the show, have your opinions heard, contribute to the show. We love contributors. Email the show at bluewhitetailgatepodcast@gmail.com. We're going to get to the email bag in just a bit related to last week's show. But people were on me about saying, why am I picking Penn State number 1? They weren't going to be number 1. I was pretty close.
You were very close. You were very close. I thought they would be ahead of Ohio State in the writers' poll. The coaches, it's a little bit different animal, different approach, different way of thinking about it. I was a little surprised that they came as close to number 1 as they did. I mean, it was just a few points. It's not important.
I'm surprised because, James Franklin can't win the big game. And there's seemingly, what kind of national faith is there in Drew Aller? And yet they're almost number 1. So what is it? Right?
Yeah, it is something. I mean, it's a thing. And I think on some intuitive level, most people know that they can't win the big one thing without any context. That label by itself is really a load of crap. I think that's something for people to talk about, but nobody really believes that.
It's a talking point. It's a talking point for the Colin Cowherds of the world. It's a talking point for the Paul Feinbaums of the world, who said if a Big Ten team wins a national championship, he's leaving the country. I'm not quite sure where he'd be going, and I'm not quite sure if his show is going to go with him. But that is what Paul Feinbaum said.
A lot of questions, yeah.
So, any surprises to you out of the AP poll?
Right?
No, not really. I mean, you know what? On both polls, there's a part of me that might be a little surprised that quite as high as Ohio State is, because I think they're the reigning national champs. They're always really good, but they have to replace a lot, and I think with that factor and a brand new quarterback, and really not returning. I mean, they don't return a whole lot on their line, So it's just I thought they'd be more like a 5 or 6. At least in one of the polls.
Well, a couple of things about Ohio State. Number one, they still haven't picked a quarterback, which means that they don't have the guy. They haven't found the guy at that critical position. They have lost a lot. They're breaking in a new defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, who I think has kind of an uneven resume. and he is. They're going to a 3-4, which is a pretty significant change. And they play Texas week 1. They play the number 1 team in the country. So all of that together, come to think of it, I think, and other people have said that. Feinbaum, in fact, said he thinks Ohio State is too high.
I'm thinking Paul Feinbaum thinks Alabama should be where Penn State is, but gang. Also, I mean, I know Notre Dame needs to find a new quarterback, but maybe they are where they should be, right around 6. But I think with their running game, to me, they're the team that you're going to look at the very end of the season, and they're going to be right there again like they were last year.
Yeah, it could be.
Because of why
they are going to be able to run it, although so is Penn State. I may have said this before on the show, but I'm a little bit less high on Clemson than some other people are. But other than that, it's all there.
I'm high on Clemson. I think Clemson is a threat because of their quarterback situation, the stability, Dabo's record, and Dabo in a lot of ways it kind of mirrors James Franklin. Like he hasn't bought into the portal, and it's almost as if the way Penn State handles NIL a little bit, like not spending money on recruits to bring them in, going and finding guys that are a fit. So Dabo sticking to his guns, sticking to what he believes in, and then building it that way. And so I'm high on Clemson for that reason. Miami, I'm a little bit surprised of. I know they have transfer in, through the portal, but I just don't believe in Miami. Miami football. Illinois kind of surprised me at 12 in the AP poll. And
yeah, I would agree with that. Although I don't think it's crazy, but yeah,
I don't think it's crazy either because they got a good coach. And Michigan at 14 kind of surprised me. I think a lot of stock is being put into that Alabama win at the end of last year, and I'm not saying Alabama quit at the end of last year, but I don't think it was a laser focused Alabama team because Michigan was kind of up and down last year. So, Mike, I know on your Substack you have the Big Ten preview out. Enjoyed the read; it was a great read. So I'm a little bit down on Michigan.
Michigan is a wild card because
it's a wild card. Yeah, that's a good word.
They have this freshman quarterback who was the number 1 recruit in the country, who is sort of a hyper athletic guy and sort of in that Cam Newton mold almost. And if he turns out to be, but I mean, he just turns 18 this month. So that could go a lot of different directions. But if he turns out to be close to the hype, I think they're a dangerous team.
Frank, you've been covering Penn State forever. How hard is it for you in this era as we're going through this poll? And I kind of just said it. For me, it's incredibly difficult to keep track of who's going, who's coming, when you kind of know as you're watching games last year and you hear, oh, this offensive line, it's all sophomores and juniors, they're all coming back. And yet that could not be the case this year for, a lot of teams. And I just use that as a generic example because of the transfer portal. So how tough is it for you to kind of really go through and find your preseason rankings and how you think teams are going to play out?
I don't know for me if it's a whole lot different in that respect, because it's not that I really cover other than, hyper focused on Penn State. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, not so much focused at all on a lot of the other teams until it becomes this time of year. And when it becomes this time of year, I'm looking at maybe who they added, who they lost, but that's all part of the preview. It's, I think it's harder to tell maybe where some of those fits will, what will they do to the season? Because a lot of them are quarterbacks, or they're high priority, high changeable positions, right? Indiana is trying to go 2 for 2 with high level transfer quarterbacks. The last one worked out really well. If this one does, they could challenge to me themselves for the kind of year they had. But if he doesn't, he gets hurt, he doesn't pan out. To me, that's the risk. Whereas Drew Aller there for 3 years, right? Indiana's got a new quarterback of the year here every time you look, and you have no idea how a kid from California is going to suddenly play in the Big Ten. I mean, that's why to me they're like the biggest crapshoot in the league. What are they going to be like come the middle of November, beginning of November? Who knows?
I agree. It really comes down to the quarterback position with this kind of thing that we're talking about. There are so many teams that are in that situation that Indiana's in. I mean, UCLA is that way, and if you look around the country, there's a lot of teams that are in that situation. The free agent quarterback, which is a relatively new phenomenon, is really a wild card.
Absolutely. But yet, what makes Penn State, obviously Drew Aller is really important, but to me, it's really everything around Drew Aller. They haven't brought everything back like they have this year around the quarterback. So that's what makes them special in their own right compared to a lot of these other teams. I mean, like you said, Clemson brings back a good bit. I mean, their defensive line, they have two of the top defensive linemen in the country in that,
Yeah, and
Penn State good out of that, but
and 6 teams ran for 250 yards or more against them last year, including the Citadel.
Okay,
I just don't. Clemson on the line of scrimmage to me.
I want to know how you know that.
Yeah, well, because I looked. Because I was surprised.
Why did you look?
Well, because I did national rankings and stuff, but we saw SMU play Penn State in the playoff. It was 38-10, and Penn State didn't really even have to throw the ball. The week before, SMU outgained Clemson by 135 yards.
A little different environment, and I think that plays.
Different environment, yeah, but I don't know.
Penn State's offense actually didn't even have to take the field against SMU. Let's kind of be honest. I mean, the defense for Penn State was doing quite the job scoring some points.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, so, but I think God bless the guys like Phil Steele that have to go through with these preview magazines. How much output
and the portal and all this stuff we've been talking about has made that exponentially.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. There used to be, okay, well, you could go through and, I think back to growing up, like the Sports Illustrated previews. And it was like, okay, well, you could kind of, roll some of this stuff over. Now it's like, it has to be a 365 job just to keep track of what's going on.
I read a piece the other day, I think it was in The Athletic, about preseason college football magazines. And it said in that piece that the Phil Steele preseason magazine is Barnes & Noble's best-selling magazine on any topic every year.
That works.
How about that?
That's right. All right, let's go to the email bag. Got this one from Dave in Jameson, Pennsylvania. Long email. Not going to read it out in order as he said it. So he's towards the end, he goes, I am self-aware. I'm an old guy who learned a lot from the football coach back in the 80s. I don't think Saban had to revere Paul Bear Bryant all the time, but I bet he referred to his legacy and how Saban and the school benefit, even if only occasionally. I'll bet their current coach has said the words Nick Saban too. So you kind of get where this email is going. I led him with that to make sure that people understand that Dave is very self-aware of where he's coming from. Gents, I really enjoyed the interview with LeVar Arrington. Seemed to really be at ease talking about Joe Paterno and what Joe would have thought about LeVar's work. It made me think. I can't remember the last time I heard James say the words Joe Paterno. Why? Is it the same kind of superficial way he used to say my previous institution? Is it contrived to focus only on looking forward? He does reference tradition foundation of winning at Penn State, but just won't say the word. Here's a press conference. He would like us to ask a press conference question to Coach Franklin. What advice do you think Joe Paterno would have for you and the team this year? I wonder how that would fly. So I'll go first here a little bit as answering part of this. The why and the is it superficial previous institution? I don't think it's superficial on James's part not to mention it. And as Dave says, he does mention foundation and tradition multiple times. Yes, James Franklin does not mention Joe Paterno a lot. Again, I think when James was hired, I don't want to say there was a directive, but there was an emphasis on moving forward. Bill O'Brien said we have to move forward to get Penn State past to where the part was. And at some point, we are so far past when Coach Paterno coached at Penn State that I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the program has moved so far forward that when you talk about Coach Paterno, I think it has to be very direct, and there has to be a direct connection to what you're referring to. As for the question, I don't see that question being handled well by a bunch of the fan base, because in reality, I don't think what Coach Paterno's advice would be today would translate to when Coach Paterno coached, because things are so different. And people know I'm a Joe Paterno guy. Like I talked about Joe Paterno when I had my office before it was being turned into a nursery. I had a Wheaties box of Joe Paterno right behind me. So it's not like I'm hiding behind anything there. But those are just my thoughts on Dave's email. Dave, we really appreciate the email. I think it's a valid question. I think a lot of the frustration from the Penn State fan base gets pushed onto James Franklin regarding Coach Joe Paterno, when really the frustration is with the administration and how things were handled. And I think James unfairly gets a lot of blame on that. Now, are there some things behind the scenes that we don't know about? I'm sure there are.
Well, I think that Franklin not mentioning Joe is very deliberate and thought out. I think it is about moving forward, and I think that's pretty much happened. I mean, people look how excited the fan base is about this season, and it's a much different. The program is a much different animal than it was before Franklin got here, and in the previous era. And look at the coaching staff, look at the facilities, look at the approach to recruiting, look at all of that stuff. They have taken these giant strides. It's always going to bother some people that Joe's not more of the conversation, because they revere Joe, and that's fine. But I think as a practical matter, I think Franklin is really thinking practically here. I think he thought for a long time, we want to separate and we want to walk a tightrope where we try to respect the tradition, but we don't want to go back to all of that stuff and all the baggage that comes with Joe's name. And I think he's done that pretty successfully, although it's some people are just going to be mad about it.
Right. Yeah, as far as university goes, I don't understand the baggage in the sense that you could walk into that. I think I've said this before here. You could go to a Penn State home football game, go into the stadium, see the game and leave, and never know that the man coached there, which he's the all-time leader in wins in college football history. How can you not know basically that the guy coached there? So that's in a sense ridiculous to me at this point in time. Now, as far as James goes, I mean, he's focused on his team. I mean, how many places would you go where you would expect Nick Saban, did he talk about Bear Bryant on a regular basis? I mean,
I don't think he did. That's the one thing where
I don't think so.
The email, I don't really.
That part I don't quite get, but I think that, like you said, Andrew, it's really about the whole feeling. It's not really, to me, about James, because I'm not really sure where would that come up necessarily easily in conversation at this point. I mean, maybe 10 years ago when James first came aboard, that's different. But I mean, I don't really see where that goes, except for I think they need to do something to make sure that you can know that the guy coached there. That's just unbelievable to me.
Well, yeah, it's enough time. It feels like enough time has passed now that having to talk about it is not as much of an issue, and B, being able to recognize him would not being able to recognize Joe, as you're suggesting, Frank, would not be as much of an issue as it was when Franklin got here. And certainly what he's done in building the program is part of the reason why that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's fear that comes out of Old Main because they don't want to deal with a column that's written or a national. They believe it's dredging up, a national story that the headline is Penn State honors or recognizes Joe Paterno, and then whatever follows that. I don't think administration wants to deal with that. And outside of, Frank, you said walking into the stadium, you could walk in and not know the guy coached there, except for 3 snippets on a video board to intro the game. Is
true
on the outside wall at Legacy Plaza, but on the outside wall before it was called Legacy Plaza, and who knows, everybody bought those bricks, whether they're there after renovations. It's, I don't know. Hopefully they don't pull a Pittsburgh Pirates thing and, tear them down. But there is bricks out there on the wall in the limestone colored cement or whatever it is that says, these people are honoring Coach Joe Paterno's coaching legacy. That is built into the stadium. And I always said, well, if taking down the statue was that much and not honoring the guy, well, why are those bricks still there? Why is that plaque still up there as well? Almost like an Easter egg, that you got to find it. So I think it's inconsistent from the administration part. I think it would have done James Franklin, would have been more beneficial for James Franklin had the administration been stronger, and then James would have been able to do whatever, and I don't think people would have cared.
That sounds pretty good. I didn't think of,
James did run in the Paterno Special Olympics 5K. He didn't run the whole thing because I was by him running. Bodyguard Monica was with him. Daughter was with him. It was kind of cool. They had to take a break for walks like when he first got there. So there has been, participation on both sides. And again, we all are aware of the Board of Trustee votes for funding and things like that. I don't think the way some of those have gone have helped any situation.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think,
Well, there is some of that sentiment, I think, within the Board of Trustees. But the bottom line is, with the Board of Trustees now, is that alignment that James talks about. I mean, it's there. It's there, even if there are some individuals within the Board of Trustees, which has 30 some people on it, that for whom this is what we're talking about. It's a big issue.
The biggest issue at hand for Penn State football is getting ready for the opener against Nevada and working their way to what a lot of people expect, a national championship this year. You have to be fired up. You can't rest on what happened last year. James has talked about buying into expectations and actually, staying laser focused, which is something Penn State's been able to do very well under James Franklin. Had a chance to catch up with Zane Durant at practice. He had that great quote last year that we played here on the podcast, balls to the wall late in the season. Got to ask him about that, how it's hot. Your number 2 team, you kind of got a bad schedule. Some people would say an embarrassing pre-conference schedule. So I asked Zane about staying focused leading into the season, especially when it's hot and muggy and you're going against your own guys.
Yeah, it's always improvement, constant improvement, regardless of what anybody thinks about us. Football is football. No rank is going to make you go out there and beat somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, you got to play football, and we put our best foot forward every day. So we always trying to improve, get better than we was yesterday.
Guys, being at practice, being able to watch it, this Penn State team just looks different when you walk in there. There are, you go over to look at the offensive line, and it is a bunch of guys that, look like they're just ready to play football. I remember when Donovan Smith was up there, and you kind of knew, like, that guy is an NFL caliber offensive lineman. Now you go in there and you see 5, 6, 7 guys that are going to play in the NFL. I'm looking at Deion Barnes. He's rolling around on the grass. Dan Connor is really getting after it with the guys. And by the way, Dan Connor still looks like he could, put on a helmet and pads and go to work with these guys. Just your impression when you guys were at media day, when you guys were at practice, walking around, seeing these guys, do you guys feel a different vibe and kind of like what Zane Durant is saying?
Well, the big thing and you're alluding to it, Andrew, is that how many players they have, the depth they have, the offensive line. It really manifests itself. But then it's also, like the wide receivers. I mean, I realize that's not a strength, but there's a lot of dudes that look like good athletes. Secondary, same thing. It's just they have a lot of depth, and they have a lot of experience, and they have a lot of athletes that it's very evident when you watch it.
Yeah. You've been searching for really an offensive line for 30 years. I mean, one that Penn State fans are proud of, right? One that when they made their runs, right, in the 80s through Joe's time, late 70s through the 80s into the 90s, that was the backbone. And I think fans got used to that was the driving. And it really is the most important position in a lot of ways on the whole field, because I think the offensive line, more than anything, can control the tempo of the whole game. And Penn State's had decent ones. They've had some really good players, but they haven't had this collection of blockers. And that's what I'm most fascinated to see, especially when the games get more challenging, because if they're as good as we keep hearing or keep thinking, or as Nick Dawkins keeps professing, is who can beat them? I mean, really, that's to me the biggest thing. I mean, you're talking potentially an offensive line as good as anyone, maybe in college football the last few years. That level, that's what we hear, but it's a hard time believing it at Penn State, right? Because how long have we kept hearing this is going to be really good? That's the key. I mean, they've had great players. 2017, they had elite skill players, but in the end, they didn't have the offensive line. It didn't hold up. In the end of 16, the end of 17, they didn't have what they have now. So, to me, that kept them from winning the biggest games.
100%. Yeah, I think the offensive line opens up the playbook, makes the coordinator's job easier, makes play calling easier, makes firing all your weapons easier. We all know this. The offensive line is the engine room of a football team.
It's striking, I think it maybe is the word, when you walk down. For people who don't know, when you walk in to the Penn State football practice facility, when they're outdoors, you come in a side gate, you walk past the weight room and the facility, and it's a long walk down to where the offensive line is always working, and they're working on the AstroTurf field. And that's the closest you could kind of get to the team right there. And it's pretty impressive watching them go through drills compared to years prior. They're just quicker. The movements look more, I'll say, surgical. Maybe deliberate's a better word. They're powerful, the steps. And again, it's I don't want people to think I'm making stuff up, but you could honestly, for a person who knows nothing about playing offensive line, I'm 5'10", 145 pounds. You could tell that there's a difference between this group and groups of James Franklin's past. So, I mean,
well, and the other thing is that we've been looking at Drew Aller for 3 years, but has he really had a collection of wideouts ever that he deserves? Well, he may, whatever word you want to use, have that finally. Could be unbelievable. I mean, he got through a whole season throwing to his tight end last year. He's had
more and more. More and more, the three transfers are the guys that everybody's talking about, including Franklin. I mean, it seems more and more clear that those three guys are going to start. I mean, I guess I risk being criminally obvious here, but those guys could make a big difference if they're even close to what it sort of feels like their potential is.
And those are going to be the guys. It doesn't matter how bad the competition is the first 3 weeks. They're the first players that fans are going to be looking at. The first players the media is going to be looking at is going to be Drew Aller throwing to the 3 new wide receivers. Doesn't matter if they're playing Villanova, FIU, whoever. People are going to start judging and forming their opinions to me, more than anything else on that entire team, on that one facet right off the bat. So
second play against Nevada is going to be a go route. The first play will be a handoff to Nick Singleton. The second play is going to be a go route.
Book it, my friend.
That's my prediction. You guys jumped ahead a week. I was saving the sound from Kyron Hudson because he was available after practice. I was saving him till next week. So we'll get into the wide receivers a little bit more next week. I'm going to keep focusing here on the defense. But Jim Knowles, he was kind of blunt, which it's kind of eerie watching Jim Knowles work the field. You know, you guys have seen it.
I know.
You guys have written about it.
He's mostly hands off. Now, supposedly, he was a little bit more involved, at least verbally, last night. But generally, he reminds me of a guy like visiting an art museum, just sort of wandering around, checking his notes once in a while and looking around and going, you know. He's a very unusual in terms of his demeanor for a football coach. I've never seen anything quite like it.
I was 3 feet from him, and I was trying to be very deliberate in my movements, not to like startle him, as he was like standing in front of me, and I kept like looking like out of the side eye to see like what he's doing. Like, it's Coach Knowles, and he was just stalking the linebackers and just watch. And then all of a sudden, he's perfectly quiet. One of the linebackers goes through, and I didn't see who it was because I'm watching him. And I don't hear the bag slap coming around as they're working on pass rush drills. And I hear Jim say, "You didn't even touch the bag. You didn't touch the bag." Back in the drill, go through. That was the only thing I heard. Moved on to the defensive line. Then moved over to the DBs and just observing from a distance. I mean, it's different, right, Frank?
I don't get it, actually. I'm thinking he doesn't I don't really know anything about defensive coordinators, I guess, in a sense, but this is the highest paid guy in college football like history. And to me, he was wandering around. I'm not sure what he was even doing on media day at practice, but
yeah, that's how he is. Most of the time, that's how it is.
The players are saying that it's exciting. They are buying in from what we hear. I mean, his track record is what it is. So that's the thing, too, is that you already have really good talent, especially on defense at Penn State, no matter who's in charge of it. But when you suddenly have the highest paid, most respected defensive leader in college football in charge of it, you got to feel kind of good about that as a fan, right? That they can figure things out. I mean, more so than the past. I think there is always a caveat there, like, well, do they have what it takes in the leadership, maybe at this position group on this side of the ball? I don't think you have questions about that in any shape or form now. I mean, I'm talking going all the way back to when Joe's staff was. You always kind of wondered who was carrying the load here or there. I don't think you have any question that this is their most balanced, impressive staff that they have. I mean, it was kind of weird at media day practice when you're seeing LeVar Arrington barking comments to players, and then Dan Connor's 5 feet away from him, and it's like Paul Posluszny joins. Literally, you have the three of the best linebackers in college football history on the field at the same time. For God's sakes.
What I was struck with both what Franklin said last night and Knowles was, there are 11 practices in. It's kind of like everything is installed now, but we haven't perfected anything yet. So it's kind of maybe a frustrating time for a coach, especially since they're putting in a new defense that by reputation is complicated and takes some time to master. But I think you got to bear in mind that, they don't play a serious game until September 27th. They're going to have a month after the season starts, another 2.5 weeks of drilling it, and then a month after the season starts before it really gets serious.
Which I think is a big benefit for them. I like their schedule for them.
Yeah.
Heck with people who say they don't play anybody early on. I don't see I don't know if I really understand the grand benefit other than like for the viewing public of Texas playing Ohio State. If you're like a coaching staff of those two teams, like I don't think Penn State needs to do that to get where they want in this day and age. I think
they don't, but then I don't want to hear this nonsense that, well, we're superior to the SEC because we played 9 conference games. I don't want to hear that either because that's a load of crap.
That's well, I mean, Ohio State is in the Big Ten and they're playing this game, so I give that's part of the Big Ten's props, right, for that. Just not
yeah.
Again, the SEC schedule, and I think what Mike's getting at is the SEC schedule is pretty weak to start. Not as weak because they rotate one of their conference games up early, but then you always count on that mid-season or late season 1AA team or FCS. Sorry,
yeah, the non-conference joke of a game in November. That's where the SEC deserves some criticism.
I just don't really, and with the way the playoff system is now, I'm less really in tune to who you're playing in the non-conference schedule, because if you're somebody like Penn State, you got to play, this year you're playing 2 top 10 teams right off. I mean, you're playing Ohio State, you're playing Oregon, but then look at who you could play from the Big Ten championship game through the playoffs. You get your teams, right? You're going to be proving yourself.
Yeah, sure. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to hear Big Ten coaches saying, and James has said this many times, that well, everybody's got to play 9 conference games or there's not a level playing field. For the playoff committee. I think that's ridiculous.
I agree. Back to Coach Knowles, which we've mostly seen him talk into a microphone. When he's not talking into a microphone, I mean, I could see James Franklin coming out in a puffy shirt, and that's a Seinfeld reference to the Low Talker episode, because and this goes back to kind of what LeVar was saying. It was almost like mysterious was the word that LeVar used, cerebral. It's just, he's a low talker, informative talker. It's just really low. It kind of catches you off guard the first time you are around him up close and you hear how low he talks as he's answering your questions. He was kind of blunt in his assessment, completely different from what James normally says about, they're working through it. We got to get better. Bad football versus good football. Knowles was kind of blunt when asked about the linebacking core, that he only trusts 3 guys: DeLuca, Rojas, and Amari Campbell. So that was striking to me. And then there was more talk of green dot last night. But Dan Connor was less, I don't want to say less negative, but he was more coach talk of their young guys. They're getting it. They're getting some things done really good. We just got to keep working towards it. And Mike, that goes to what you were saying about the install. So where do you guys think, is it in the middle? Is Jim Knowles being too hard on his guys verbally out in public as a motivation tactic right there? Or is it a classic undersell that he's kind of confident in where these guys are right now? Because the linebackers, they are unproven, and I think everybody would agree they're the question mark. LeVar said they wouldn't be a weak link, but at least on paper and experience-wise, that is the question mark.
I think that James and Knowles both were pretty blunt last night in saying we got 3 that we can trust. I thought James said that too last night. We got 3 that we can trust. Of course, Connor's going to speak highly about his guys, and that's natural and correct for a position coach. They have 3 right now that they can trust. They might only have to play 2 much of the time in Knowles' system. They might not need to play, but obviously you got to have some depth at that position. And I just find it a little bit noteworthy that we have not heard about guys like Specca, who we were hearing about a lot for a while. I mean, those younger, we're just not hearing names other than those 3 guys. And I thought Franklin and Knowles were both pretty honest about saying last night, And that is a little bit of an issue. It's a pretty good problem to have. It's kind of a first world problem when you're worried about your fourth and fifth and sixth linebacker when you might only be playing two at a time.
They have talked about some young guys. Some have been completely absent, but like Chaz Coleman, the new defensive end, who I think what Knowles referred to as the Chazmanian Devil.
Nice.
And did we ever call Chaz Powell that? I don't think we did we?
I can't believe you didn't come up with that.
No, that's really unbelievable.
For a local guy for you.
For a nickname guy. Anyway, but that's I think you do have some of that. You have some young guys that are not going to be ones that you're counting on right away, but I think this goes back to the whole depth question. To get through 14, 15, 16 games, you're going to need some of those guys that we're mentioning now to be able to play roles at some point. And I think they're in good shape in that regard. I mean, at most positions, like look at tight end. Where's Tyler Warren? Well, you got 3-4 other guys. How many teams have 3 guys at tight end like Penn State can trot out? And I think that's some things that you're going to see that's going to really help them. Maybe you're not focusing on at the moment, but as we get to the Big Ten, yes, you will.
I love how people in the national media, you brought up the 3 tight ends, and like the people in the national media nobody's talking about Penn State's tight ends. Nobody's talking about how good their offensive line is. It's like I saw Jake Butt from the Big Ten Network tweet that out. No, like that's actually what the people that follow the team and that cover the team have been saying sets this team apart. The offensive line and that losing Tyler Warren, the tight end room still might be better top to bottom now than it actually was when Tyler Warren was here because the talent flashed multiple times. Khalil Dinkins just needed the ball thrown to him, and he would have put up great numbers as a number 2. So I love how that is kind of the narrative of you talk about the depth, Frank. Going back to Knowles, I asked Jim last night, I should say, about Dan Connor, about him moving into that defensive coach role instead of being an analyst. And you couldn't sing high enough praises. Smart, intense, the connection with the guys, being able to take Jim Knowles' message and deliver it to the players on how he wants things done. He doesn't feel like he has to watch over and nitpick that Dan is picking up everything going on. So that made me walk across Haluba. There's Dan Connor, and I wanted to ask Dan Connor, compare the growth of Dan Connor from walking on the field in 2004 as a freshman, leaving as an All-American, best defensive player in the country winner, to now Dan Connor's growth as an analyst in the coach. Here's Coach Dan Connor talking about that.
It's similar in so many different ways. I mean, I came here as a player and had a great coach, Ron Vanderlyn, an unbelievable coach, had great people around me in my room with, Paul Poslusny, Tim Shaw, Derek Wake, a lot of older guys that I could learn from, similar to coming here. And, you have Coach Franklin to learn from, Manny Diaz to learn from. Then as I got older, a couple of years in, then, you have Sean Lee and Var Bowman, you have other guys coming in that can push you as a player, teach you as a player. And then, we get one of, if not the best, defense coordinator in all of football, any level that's going to push you and make you grow. So, at both spots as a player, as a coach, I've been surrounded by people that can push you and make you uncomfortable. And that's the key to growth. If you're just constantly uncomfortable as much as you don't want to be, I mean, that's where you're going to get good fast.
I've had questions on the linebackers, and just listening to Dan Connor talk, I thought this is the guy that's going to coach them up. Like I felt that, and by watching him work.
He's a pretty good talker, and he's a really likable dude, I think, Connor. And my sense is that Jim Knowles is really good for him. I think that's a really good connection there. And he kind of spelled it out better than I could just now in that quote. That seems like a lot of times the linebacker coach is a coordinator or has been a coordinator. So I don't know. I just think Jim Knowles is good for Connor, and Connor is probably Connor with his enthusiasm and everything is probably good for Knowles.
Going off of the green dot conversation, because that was another topic, who's going to be talking into the helmet for the defense? And Dan kind of like let it slip that, or it sounded like it let it slip that it's going to be Jim Knowles. As you know, coach was like, "Oh, we'll like work on it." I could see that being a double duty. Also because Jim Knowles ain't the youngest, pencil in the box, so that you would think that could be a natural growth for Dan Connor. As James talks about kind of developing guys. Normally that's the blue-white game, putting them in different roles. So maybe you would think for certain games, certain situations, Dan would be the one talking into the green dot, into the helmet on the field.
Well, Dan did it last year, correct? Because people struggled to hear the previous defensive coordinator. Now, the way we're talking with Jim Knowles,
louder than the current defensive coordinator.
Yeah, in a whole different way, though. You could still but can Jim Knowles, does he have the voice to do this? I'm thinking Dan Connor might be doing it again, because you need somebody the players can understand. They couldn't understand the calls in the Bowling Green game, right? They almost looked like they weren't sure what they were doing. That got fixed. I'm thinking Dan Connor might be relaying the calls, and Amari Campbell might be wearing the green dot, because crazy maybe for some to think as a transfer, but he did it in North Carolina, and he's going to be on the field. I mean, he's going to be in that position in a way I think that Kobe King had, in some like same maybe type of responsibility. So he, to me, makes the most sense.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I would pick Campbell to be the guy that's on the receiving end of it. And as Franklin said last night, you think, well, he's a new guy. He just got here. Yeah, but they're all new in Knowles' system.
Right, exactly.
Well, yeah, my guess would be that it's going to be Campbell. Yeah.
Underrated, but maybe biggest transfer pickup, because can you get through the season with only 2 linebackers that Jim Knowles can count on?
That's
okay. You only have 3 right now, and we understand maybe why to some degree, but you need 3 at least. My God, and to be able to pick up him at the end of the second portal window.
Yeah, and he feels more like a middle linebacker than any of them, than any of the other ones. Certainly more than Tony Rojas. Yeah.
What's the old saying? When you have 3, you're 1 short for a lot of positions. You guys, right? Okay.
I think it's at least a decent, if you have 3 on August 13th, you have the chance to develop more in the next, not just the next 2 weeks, the next 5 weeks, right? Because you're not really playing a game where you're going to need more linebackers probably until September 27. Unless you have a situation like you did in 2016, where all of a sudden everybody at the same position is getting hurt. I mean, that's the only thing I think that can help derail this team, is to have mass injuries at one position. But
and as you say, that happening,
yeah, but there's answers, right? They got through that in 2016 at linebacker, and at the time you're thinking, how are they going to? Well, they could do it then. I think it kind of bodes well. You can conquer.
They're better equipped to do it now. Yeah.
One more soundbite from Coach Knowles, and this was in response to asking about the rotation up front, as Penn State does have some depth issues, or I don't want to say depth issues, but proven experience issues at some positions up front. And he was asked about, what do guys have to show to get on their field into the rotation? Here's Jim Knowles talking about that.
They at least display one talent where they can handle things at this level, then we can find ways to rotate them in. They can do now. If they can do both run and pass, that's a big bonus.
I mean, it's pretty simple. If you could rush the passer, we'll find a way to get you on the field. If you could be a wall against the run and be a bull there, we'll find a way to get you on the field in certain situations, and that's huge. He's not looking for these guys to master, as young players, both issues. Obviously, Chaz Coleman being one of those that I think everybody thinks could handle both.
Yeah, Chaz Coleman is kind of the story here that maybe we wouldn't have seen coming a month ago. The aforementioned Chazmanian Devil out of Ohio. who might be able to help them as an edge rusher right away. And otherwise, Ford, what's his name? Alonzo Ford and Zariah Fisher are probably going to be the guys that Ford at tackle and Fisher at end that are going to be in addition to the guys that are like all-American caliber players who were denied Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant. And here's something where we'll see Knowles put the strategy hat on. Teams are going to Durant and Dennis Sutton are such good players that teams are kind of going to have to game plan for them. They're kind of going to have to locate them and double team them or whatever. So what does Knowles do to counteract that? Does he have a stunt on one side, a blitz on one side that frees up Dennis Sutton on the other side one-on-one? That kind of thing. I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch.
I'm telling you, Jim Knowles is not going to be relaying the signals. I just listened to his voice again on that clip. There is no way he's going to be doing it.
He was really quiet on there.
When has he not been?
And you're right next to him. I mean, look at the camera. You're right.
Tom Allen was loud, but Tom Allen had the raspiest voice.
Yeah, he was hard to understand.
It's like Bonnie Tyler singing, right? I mean, come on. I mean,
probably his role model.
It probably is, but you wouldn't want her relaying signals into your linebacker in the middle of the game either. All right, so
is that a good pop culture reference? The Seinfeld low talker? Is that?
Oh yeah. It's all pipes, Jerry.
If I could have a sit down and do a little comedy sketch with James Franklin, I would definitely ask him like who the hand model is on the team and kind of just go through that entire Seinfeld episode. It's one of my favorites.
My sense is that James is not a Seinfeldophile. Could be wrong.
Probably not. So, just going through the sound bites and, who was on the show last week, LeVar. Brandon Short was at practice yesterday, saw him walking out. But having Dan Connor drop Sean Lee, Paul Posluszny, Navarro Bowman, LeVar, you talk about some other names on there. That's 8 guys out of my top 10 all-time Penn State linebackers that have been like referenced at a practice or, by one of the coaches, which is pretty surreal.
Wait, they're of your 10 all-time Penn State linebackers?
Yeah.
So you named 8 guys, but they're all recent guys pretty much, right? Like big
guys. Yeah.
So what happened to Penn State's linebackers from the previous 25 years?
Oh, well, I was, Shane Conlon was referenced in the show as well. So that counts as one. And then I do have Jack Ham on there and Denny Oncon on there as well. So those are 2 of the other guys, but those are 8. And I think that when you talk about, Frank, as you said earlier in the show, some of the greatest linebackers of all time, if you would have thrown Paul Posluszny out on the field at media day, I mean, you got, 3 of the greatest linebackers to play college football, at least at Penn State. So
when we actually do this segment, whenever that is on our respective top 10 linebackers, I have a feeling that we're going to have all 3 of us will have the same 10 guys or very close. Where we'll have them ranked will be an interesting debate. But some of the guys that are not going to be in that top 10 were great. It really is amazing.
Absolutely. And I just did a piece on ranking the top 25 Penn State players of the last 25 years. And I've gotten some pushback, understandably so, where I had Trace McSorley very, very high.
Oh.
And one particular reader said, I don't see him at that position that you had him. I just don't see it, Frank. And I actually had him, this is my own thoughts, right? I actually technically had him above Paul Posluszny, and I was rethinking this as this reader came to me. And I think that was a slight at Paul Posluszny because I am correct that he is in the College Football Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
But Trace, and the thing is with quarterbacks, though, they do so many different things and they're on the spotlight so much. I think sometimes you have a tendency to put them above other players in your mind.
They are
But
so.
it shows you that Paul was really one of the not just best linebackers at Penn State, but what he did. I mean, really, truly one of the best linebackers in college football history. I believe, right? So,
Do you have him number one, Frank? Do you have him number one
of all time? No, I'm not saying one of the best, right?
in linebackers on your Penn State linebacker list? Do you have him number one?
I would have him number one.
This is giving us a sneak peek. Wow, that's surprising.
I think it's a hands down. Oh no, well, you know what? The thing is like I never saw Jack Ham play, and it's a different era. And was Jack the same? This is the same with Lydell Mitchell. Both were so good in the NFL, and that's what a lot of fans remember them too. But were they the same players? I'm sorry, I said Lydell Mitchell. I meant Lenny Moore.
Lenny Moore,
okay.
Yeah.
So Lenny was not exceptional, and this is not his fault, at the same things in college as he was in the NFL, because Penn State didn't throw the ball. Yeah. Lenny in college, well, the Colts made him a revelation by throwing the ball to him in the NFL, and that's partly why he became an NFL Hall of Famer. And Jack was one of the best pass defenders in NFL history as a linebacker, maybe the best, right? But is that what he was known for at Penn State? So
on my list, and I kind of get what you're saying.
Are we actually doing this now?
No, we're not doing it now. We're just
teasing the hell out of this for the
because you really could do a whole 1 hour episode of the best linebackers at Penn State. You really can. But going back to Frank, your column on 25 best players at Penn State in the last 25 years, I think that when it comes to writing columns like that and ranking guys, and this is how I do it, is certain guys rise to the occasion. So, like, maybe Trace McSorley, for a lot of people, would be behind a Dan Connor. But Trace was so important to lifting Penn State up in the program that as a player, he might be behind Dan Connor, but you would flop him over Dan Connor and maybe even Paul Posluszny because of him elevating the program. Paul Posluszny, though, elevated the program as well from the dark ages and put Penn State on a trajectory. So then Puz goes over him. So it's hard to say, Devin still made like a defensive tackle. Where would Devin still be on that list as a second round draft choice and an All-American at defensive tackle as opposed to a Trace McSorley? So I understand.
Yeah, Devin still didn't make my list.
I was just throwing that out there as a.
The only other thing I'll mention for people is that I ended up having Darryl Clark, I think, significantly too low on my list, and I'll just leave it at that. Everything else I'm pretty.
The key is email into the show once you read Frank's column at ydr.com. Don't email Frank's personal YDR mailbox. Email the show. Send all complaints to me. I'll filter them out. I'll be really nice to Frank and paraphrase your complaints on to Frank about them. No, email into Frank as well. We'll get those thoughts. And by the way, I've had Posluszny ranked everywhere from 1 to 7 on my Penn State all-time linebackers list.
How do you have him 7?
No. I said everywhere. I'm not saying that's where he ended up. I've done multiple drafts, and
But how would you have him on any of your drafts at number 7?
Because Sean Lee was really good. Shane Conlon was really good. Navarro Bowman, I think, is the most underrated linebacker in terms of hype and fans knowing about how good he was.
I have Posluszny closer to 7 than I have to 1.
So I mean, it's really good.
Maybe I'm underrating him.
Like, so did people think? What did people miss then that voted him the Defensive Player of the Year back-to-back seasons? Not in the Big Ten, in the country.
I know.
He's in the College Football Hall of Fame.
I know, and he probably should have won 2 Butkus Awards, if not for another great linebacker that played with Navarro Bowman in the pros, Patrick Willis, right? Because Patrick Willis won it 1 year, correct?
Probably, yeah. I think.
I mean, it was a really good time for linebackers in college football, and Penn State had some studs all around. So that's the team.
Okay, we'll stop. I want to say more, but I'm not going to because that's another podcast.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm going to get ripped.
That linebacker, I started because I thought we were going to do this. I started like looking into that and thinking about it, and scratching down some rankings, that is really going to be an interesting discussion because, man, there's a lot.
I'm waiting for an NFL linebacker who played in that era with a lot of these guys to get back to me to see if he could come on the show for that discussion. That's what I'm waiting for.
Oh,
some of these players, the thing is when I'm looking at this thing, I'm looking at the whole picture. Like, so for just a quick example, Sean Lee, a great linebacker, but Sean Lee's career at Penn State was hurt because of injuries. He wasn't able to become the player. To me, I take that into account. He wasn't able to become who he could be. Dan Connor, however, did not suffer. He was the least injured of any of those linebackers, right? He was able to play through the whole. So I think it's a little easier to judge that. And LeVar and Micah didn't play enough time at Penn State, to me, right? So it's great talent.
Bother me as much as
LeVar played 2 years, really, right?
Yeah.
How many did Micah play? 2. So are you going to say Micah is a better linebacker in 2 years, for example?
That doesn't stop me from saying it, to be honest with you.
To me, that's part of it. Because Micah could have been an all-world Heisman candidate in 2020, but when you don't play the season, how do you know what I'm saying? That's part of it.
I did not tell Coach Connor where I have him ranked.
Didn't you? That's excellent.
I'm upright. I'm not pounded into the ground.
Right.
Not that he would do that. He's too nice of a guy. Really, super great guy to talk. Great.
Sorry to go off on a tangent.
So, no, it's great stuff. So, we weren't even planning on talking about linebackers. It just kind of went there. So, when we rank our top 10 linebackers, that's an episode people don't want to miss because the plan is to have an NFL linebacker who played with a lot of the guys on the list from that era to join us to rank the linebackers, and we'll see how he ranks them. And he's going to have some biases as well because he played with some of these guys. So that does it for this edition of the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. As more people come on board, we want to thank you for watching, listening, however you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, wherever, iHeartRadio, wherever the podcast, you're getting it on YouTube as well. Don't forget, email the show, BlueWhiteTailgatePodcast@gmail.com. Till next week, as we get closer to the Penn State opener.